So I would like to start with Clementine, if I may, and to ask you to please, so again, I'm going to throw out some questions to generate a conversation among us. So if you could please tell us, what was the essence of this organization that you created, Save Our Sons and Daughters, and then answer a two-part question, which is, what did Jimmy what did Jimmy mean to the organization and its development, and what did he mean to you in your development?
I started So Sad, Save Our Sons and Daughters, in January 1987 in the aftermath of my 15 and 16-year-old sons being shot in a school-related incident. My 16-year-old died the day of the shooting. My 15-year-old died 32 years later, a few months ago. The work of So Sad was to help survivors of homicide victims. It was to help children and communities that were traumatized by violence and homicide. And more than anything, it was a mission of healing, it was a mission of love, and it really developed into a movement, and it was a movement to not just save the children, but to empower children to move beyond what was happening in their communities and the violence that they saw in their lives, to create peace and to make peace their way of life by making peace more popular and acceptable than violence. So we worked with closely with the homicide section of the Detroit Police Department, the county prosecutor's office, in helping people, all survivors of homicide victims, helping them to heal. But we also worked with perpetrators of violence, understanding that many of them had been victimized in many ways as well. So the first time, Jimmy and Grace came to all of the meetings that we started having, but I honestly did not know at that time who they were. But Attorney Alice Jennings, who helped us to organize and helped us to get a 501c3 and all of those kinds of things, she knew who they were. And because I didn't understand who this man was, I don't remember why we were outside, but we were outside and Jimmy was standing by a tree. And Earl Henderson, who was a PhD candidate at University of Michigan, and Daryl Dawsey, who was a young writer with the Detroit News, they were like children. I think James Spruill was in that number as well, Jake. But they were like children listening to Jimmy Boggs. And I just wanted to know, really, who is this man that have these young men so captivated? And Alice told me the history. And from that point, I got to know him better and to know that we shared a commonality in how we were raised. I was from the Mississippi Delta. He was from the deep south of, Alabama. And we got up early and we went to work early. So Jimmy used to call me like at 5 o'clock in the morning. And he'd say, "Hey there, girl. I just called to tell you I loves you." He knew I'd be up. And, I still get up early. As a matter of fact, I was up at 4 o'clock this morning. But nobody calls me that early anymore. But that was basically our relationship. I had a daily relationship with Grace, not as much so with Jimmy, but I had occasions to share the interactions with them and listen to them as they interacted. And Grace talked 100 words a minute, and she typed faster than that. And Jimmy, maybe 10 words a minute as he would draw things out and say, "Now, Grace." And then he would explain things to her that he wanted written because he will have thought them out. And she would type it up so fast, but then when she would read it back, it wasn't exactly what he said or what he meant. And he would go over it again and again, and he would never miss a point. He would say the same thing every single time. And she would do things so fast, but he would never miss a beat. He would go right back to it and say, "Now." And sometimes he would say, "Now, Grace," but then he'd say, "Now, what I said was," and she had to get it just like he said it. And sometimes she would regurgitate what she perceived him to say. And you'd think he was in agreement, but then he would start all over again and say the same thing until she got it like he said it. And with Grace being such an intellectual, sometimes it was a little bit too smooth. It had to be reduced to its lowest term. He wanted what he said to be in a format that anybody could understand. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I love that about him. But I think what I loved most was that he loved me. Mm-hmm. And he never failed to tell me that. And we're both third generation post-slavery. And we had many things to talk about in terms of how we were raised and how we were taught to think and how we were told that we can do anything in life that we wanted to do. And we could do that because we're free. And that wasn't always the case, with our great-grandmothers. They were not free. They were slave women. But we were free, and we didn't have to have limitations. Nobody had a right to kill my children. Nobody has a right to deny the workers fair wages for their labor. So we had much to talk about, but Jimmy gave new meaning to the word "I love you" because he always put an S on it. And Mr. Webster doesn't even do that because it was bigger than anything Mr. Webster could understand. He said, "I loves you." So the greatest thing, my takeaway from Jimmy Boggs is that he didn't just loves me, he loves us all. Still.